The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everybody, to tonight's public forecasting webinar. This is Media Monk, and of course, that's also Leroy, the general manager for the network. We'll get with Kim Marie in just a moment here. Just want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight to this nodal axis transit, Cancer-Capricorn. And also a reminder, it's kind of a very ghoulish time with transits, so as most of you know on this call, November 8th will be Jupiter into Sagittarius. So we're going to do a two-part series on November 5th. And then again the 7th for Jupiter's ingress into the sign of Sagittarius, its own sign of rulership. So I've sent out one or two emails on that, and there'll be a couple more coming next week. So you can go to that forecasting webinars page on the site, get your enrollment, make sure you get your registration link and get registered with the webinar service after the enrollment, and also be looking for an event newsletter on the same Jupiter and Sag ingress landing in your inbox. There's a couple ways that you can enroll and get that webinar registration link. So thank you for considering that. Also a Mercury retrograde coming up. So yeah, busy month of November with Jupiter and Sag. We've got, I think a week later, or on the 16th, we've got Venus direct Mercury retrograde on the same day. So yeah, it's a ghoulish good time here at the network, and we invite you to join us as you will. So with that,
I'd let you pick another word if you want.
Well, I'm in the mood. You know, we just got a new black kitty, so it's kind of my Halloween treat for everybody tonight. So I'll turn it over to you.
I prefer a different word than ghoulish. Okay. It's fall. It's Scorpio. It's just a little intense. Welcome everyone to our Cancer-Capricorn nodal axis transit. Before we get started, first of all, our housekeeping slides here at EAN. You can study with us 3 different ways. You can listen to our free weekly audio podcast on our website, on our iTunes page, on our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to our Astral Library. 1 month, 6 months, 12 months, or you can do a monthly recurring with any of the sections or all of them. Monthly recurring, you can cancel at any time. And then, of course, we have our EA course, and we have 3 different segments. And I have an old PowerPoint slide that says 25% off. If anybody's out there who's new, who wants to enroll in the course, contact Leroy. Yeah, well, we'll still give you a little bit of a discount if you want.
It'll be a discount. It'll be a 25% discount, but that is not current. So forget the coupon code Capricorn. It won't work.
Contact you.
Yeah, contact me directly.
Contact Leroy.
Upgrading to segment 2 or segment 3, or interested in segment 1. Yep.
Okay, thanks for the brevity. Is that the word? I have 70 PowerPoint slides. We have a lot to go over. This is going to be a busy nodal axis transit. But here you see on your screen the last 2 times we had the nodal axis in Cancer-Capricorn. North Node Cancer, South Node Capricorn. April 2000 to October 2001, and before that, September 1981 through March 1983. So you might want to reflect on those dates a little bit and see if there's any repeating patterns or repeating themes that you may be going through with the current nodal axis transit taking place here. There are several repeating themes besides the moon's nodal axis in Cancer-Capricorn. Probably all are aware that we have this 15-year transit of Pluto in Capricorn from 2008 to 2024. We have Saturn in Capricorn for almost 3 years, 2018, 19, 20. And then we're going to have Jupiter in Capricorn for a year in 2020. But we also have the south nodes of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto in Capricorn, as well as their north nodes in Cancer. So here these three planets are transiting in Capricorn, and they all have their south nodes in Capricorn, north nodes in Cancer. That means each and every single one of you listening has your natal south node of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto in Capricorn. Your north node, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto in Cancer. More on that a little later. We also have transiting Pluto in Capricorn crossing south of the ecliptic. That's the Earth's path around the sun. And this is taking place right at about 19 degrees Capricorn, wherever that is in your chart. NASA said it crossed south of the ecliptic July 2018. Jim Maynard's Celestial Awakenings calendar said October 31st, 2018. Richard Nodal, if you know who he is, says October 24th, 2018. Regardless, second half of 2018, Pluto crosses south of the ecliptic. I have a little bit more on that, but these are some of the major themes that we're going to look at tonight. However, let's start right off with this archetype of Cancer-Capricorn. In most astrology, this is the anima, animus, or the female-male archetypes. These are the two archetypes of the two genders. So one of the most common themes you're going to be looking at through this nodal axis transit is how do you as a woman balance your inner male, and how do you as a man balance your inner female? In other words, how do you balance the anima, animus within you, regardless of which gender you are? And this includes all the LGBTQ, regardless if you are transgender or you're bisexual. It doesn't matter what your gender is. Regardless of your gender, you have an inner female and an inner male. And emotionally, it's all going to get stirred up, and you have to look at all of the old wounds and work to evolve them. Regardless of your gender, when do you need to stand up for yourself, the animus part? And when do you need to honor your emotions and feelings, the anima part? Okay, PowerPoint's over. If you take nothing but this, that can be the bottom line to help you through this nodal axis transit. If you want a few more details, however, let's move on. First of all, very briefly, the nodal axis astronomy. The north node and south node are points in space. They're not planets. They're points in space where the moon's path or any path intersects with the plane of the ecliptic. We like to look at the ecliptic as the apparent path of the sun around the Earth when we view it geocentrically, but it's really Earth moving around the sun. The north node ascending node is where the moon or any planet's path crosses above the ecliptic. South node or descending node is where the moon or any planet's path crosses below the ecliptic. Here is a visual of it. Here's planet Earth right in the middle. And here's the apparent path of the sun. Here's the apparent path of the moon. Well, it actually is the actual path of the moon around the Earth. Here's where the moon's path crosses that ecliptic going north, north node. And then 2 weeks later, we have that moon's path going south of the ecliptic, the south node. Now, every other planet does the same visual, just like this example with the moon. And while we're on this visual, Pluto at tropical 19 Capricorn has been going south of the ecliptic over the last few months. It's a 250-year cycle. Pluto is now going to spend 125 years south of the ecliptic. The last time Pluto went north of the ecliptic was in the 1930s. During the Great Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, if you lived in the United States. The last time Pluto was right here going south of the ecliptic was in the 1700s and the American Revolution. We know this by the fact that the US has Pluto at 27.5 degrees Capricorn. And so here it is. It's actually a 248-year cycle, Pluto around the zodiac. But we astrologers kind of loosely say 250 years. What's a couple of years, give or take? There's your visual. Moon doing it, but we also have Pluto crossing south of the ecliptic as well. Now, the nodal axis of all the planets precess. They move backwards around the zodiac. And for the moon, which is what we're working with mainly tonight, takes about 18.5 years. That reversing through the zodiac signifies a return to universal source on solar lunar level. The moon's path, the sun's apparent path. The nodal axis for the moon is retrograde 90% of the time, direct 10. If you were born with the nodes retrograde, that means you have a stronger sense of destiny earlier in this life. If you were one of the 10% born with the moon's nodes direct, your sense of destiny tends to come later in life. I was born that 10% direct, and that was definitely the situation for me. I was in my mid-40s before I really had things take off for me in regards to creativity, career, a sense of destiny and love of what I'm doing. The nodes with that 18.5-year transit takes about a year and a half, 18 months to go through every sign or polarity of the zodiac. South node. This is a soul's ego from the past, the accumulation of all the emotional residues from past life. Represents security because it's already what is known from the past. Karma on every level, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. It is a point of familiarity, both positive and negative. In other words, it's the gifts that we can bring in, but it's also our Achilles heel. Can be a point of stagnation. Again, it's security, it's comfortable, it's what we know. Just think for a moment of your own south node by sign and house. You are familiar with it. This is your comfort level emotionally. Transiting south node is a leading edge of healing and releasing the past on an emotional, egoic, conscious level. North node is the leading edge development of our soul's ego in this life. It represents emotional growth and evolution, where we are trying to evolve emotionally. It will represent insecurity because it's unknown, uncharted territory. It's dharma, which is the future. It is a sense of destiny or magnetic pull forward. It is a point of movement versus that south node point of stagnation. So reflect for a moment on your own natal north node by sign and house. How many times do you really have to make a conscious emotional effort to express it, develop it? So the transiting north node is that leading edge of developing new egoic skills in our future on a conscious and emotional level. Put them together into the nodal axis. The past or south node and future or north node are always in tension of the present moment represented by the moon. And this is true in the natal chart by our natal nodal axis and moon, all of them by sign house aspects, but it's also true in the present moment right now by the transiting nodal axis and the transiting moon, all by sign house aspects. You want to know yourself emotionally? Just study those two things. Natal nodal axis and moon and the transiting nodal axis and moon. Get a little journal and just make notes And if you do that, you can then reflect back on those two methods and learn a whole lot about yourself egoically and emotionally. Again, that past will always be trying to shape the future in the present moment, because most of us are always projecting the past forward for security reasons. So here's another reason why the retrograde mean motion of the nodes represents progressively leaving that past behind and moving forward. Now, nodal axis aspects, very briefly. We have a nodal axis conjunction transiting nodes to the natal nodal axis at approximately 19, 37, 56, 75. That means north node conjunct natal north node, south node conjunct natal south node. And it will mean completion and rebirth of our nodal lessons and intentions. And about halfway through each of those cycles, the transiting nodal axis will oppose the natal nodal axis. That's that objectivity to release the past in order to move forward. Approximately 9.5, 28, 46, 65. You can carry it forward if you want to. We'll also have the transiting nodes square the nodal axis. That will represent that tension or frustration, feeling the energy in which we've got to change in some way. None of this is guaranteed to evolve. We can get stuck emotionally for security reasons, and we can repeat the patterns and lessons. And if we do this nodal cycle after nodal cycle, it's going to increase in intensity, whether it's conjunctions, oppositions, squares, or any other aspect. It will increase in intensity, trying to help us break free from old emotional patterns and evolve forward. And if you need an example on that, all you have to do is look at Donald Trump on the U.S. national stage right now. He is living it. More on that in a bit. Now, when we have the transiting nodes in any sign, and here we're going to look at North Node Cancer, South Node Capricorn, the transiting signs of the nodal axis will show the surface or the apparent issues and lessons, and the planetary rulers of those transiting signs will show the deeper or actual issues and lessons. And those deeper actual lessons will always relate back to the natal chart. So, transiting North noding Cancer, the deepest lessons are going to take place with the ruler moon by natal house sign aspects. South noding Capricorn, the deepest lessons are going to take place, the actual lessons, wherever ruler Saturn is by natal house sign and aspect. So you can just look and see where these two are in your chart and reflect off of that. Reflect on that. So the developing ego of the soul right now is going to be releasing through Saturn, the past, South Node, and it's going to be developing through the moon, North Node, future. So wherever you have transiting Cancer, Capricorn in your chart, that's going to bring up the immediacy of the issues, what appears to be going on. But as you really look at it and get deeper, it's going to be wherever your natal moon and natal Saturn are in your chart. Before we move forward, let's just reflect for a moment. We are finishing up with the nodal axis in Leo Aquarius. Here's the dates for you. And here's the dates of the last 2 cycles. If you'd like to go back 18, 37, 30, 36, 37, 38 years and see where those cycles were for you before. Instead of rattling off words, I'm just going to show you 2 screens. South Node Aquarius, ruled by Uranus. Where were you activated? Uranus Aquarius, where were you activated to objectify, break free? Aquarius is really known as being friendship, community, like-mindedness. Did we see some marching on the streets here over the last 18 months, both from the left and the right in regards to populism? The North Node was in Leo. I survived because the fire inside me burned brighter than the fire around me. Those are one of the deepest levels of the North Node in Leo. Of course, it could have been distorted into the hubris or hubria or whatever the word is, and you know, my fire is better than your fire. No, it was really about developing a deep inner love and sense of creativity for ourselves. So now we're going to move this into Cancer-Capricorn. Here's the screen again for you, just to give you some reminder that North Node in Cancer, the ruler is the Moon. South Node in Capricorn, the ruler is Saturn. So let's start with the past. Oops, before that though, let's look at the ingress. The ingress of the nodal axis into Cancer-Capricorn is the United States midterm election day, which is November 6, 2018. I draw 0 Aries charts, so we look at the generic chart. It's familiar for all of us, no matter where we live. And I draw from my little hometown, Rapid City, South Dakota. The ingress is 11:09 a.m. Mountain Standard Time on November 6th. You can extrapolate the time wherever your time zone is. As you can see, we have 2 major themes going on here. We have Venus and the Moon square the nodes, and we have Uranus square the nodes as well. And one of the things that's going to happen for Uranus later on November 6th, it will retrograde back into Aries, along with this nodal axis theme. We also have the theme of the grand trine in water between Jupiter in late Scorpio, the nodes in North Node Cancer, and of course Chiron retrograde in late Pisces. We'll look at each of this. And so as I looked at Venus square the nodes, as I looked at this Uranus square the nodes, here's another major theme just with this ingress chart. Are we going to evolve our values, or are we going to remain stuck in our fears? Venus values and the Uranus fears, both of them feeling like they can be pulling the rug out from underneath us. If I look at this chart from just the perspective of the US midterm elections, I think there will be a mixture of progressives winning elections and some of the conservatives winning elections as well. Stay tuned. We'll see how the final story will be written on this November 7th. But quite an interesting ingress chart that has such strong aspects with the nodal axis reversing into that Cancer-Capricorn. Not only does it represent the or emphasize the emotions with the grand trine in water, it also emphasizes the cardinal modality. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We'll look at this in various aspects as we move along, but let's quickly review when the Capricorn and the South Node's transiting through Capricorn. In evolutionary astrology, we look at the planet, sign, and house as an interchangeable archetype. They are one archetype. There are 12 archetypes in the zodiac. Each one of those 12 archetypes have a spectrum of meaning, from extremes of distortion to the best of their natural expressions. So we will look at this Capricorn archetype as the active polarity, cardinal modality, earth element. Active cardinal earth. Earth being that physicality. And so South Node moving into Capricorn, we're going to be very much interested in the physicality of everything. But as you're going to see here, there's a lot of it that's crumbling. How well can you let go of your outer world? However, Capricorn is known as the structure of the individuated consciousness. It's the boundaries of what is known on a conscious level within our soul. It's also the bridge into the unconsciousness, the outer planets, and wanting to suppress whatever is coming up from beneath the surface. And so Saturn Capricorn 10th house is a filter for all the other archetypes in consciousness, meaning all the inner planets from Jupiter back to the sun, and even the unconscious planets, Chiron through Pluto. They're all filtered through Saturn, Capricorn in the 10th house, wherever they are in your chart. And remember, we said that the actual work and lessons will be wherever natal Saturn is in your chart. You can look and see what house Capricorn is on natally, what house cusp. You can look to see what planets are active in your 10th house. That's going to give you some idea of what you are needing to emotionally and egoically release over the next 18 months. And as we're looking at this South Node in Capricorn, even though it's Earth, again, the filter of everything in your world is going to become emotional. Capricorn South Node is also that principle of all our environmental conditioning factors in our life. Familial, social, political, religious, resources, everything that is put together from our past in the ways we've been conditioned by consensus society. It's all going to be coming up for review with the South Node in Capricorn. Now, Capricorn is also where we have judgments relative to whatever standard of right, wrong conduct we have been exposed to with our environmental conditionings. Keep in mind that most of these standards of right, wrong conduct are set by consensus society versus what EA would call natural spiritual principles or natural law. And we can feel conditioned guilt if we disobey these right, wrong standards. Give you an example of this right now with the South Node in Capricorn. There is a subset of consensus society which believes in a standard of right conduct to be cruel against a religion, Jews. They call it anti-Semitism or whatever it is. I'm not the best at pronouncing words. And so look at this right now where we have one set or one group of people who says it's okay to take anyone who is of a certain belief system or religion and again, literally kill them, literally go out there and hurt them. The question that's going to unfold through the South Node in Capricorn is, does the larger majority of consensus society agree with the standard of right conduct? Or does the larger majority of consensus society feel that this is something wrong? Stay tuned. We'll watch it unfold. Again, Capricorn and the South Node transiting through Capricorn is going to represent consensus society in general. and all of its rules, norms, taboos, laws that allow any group of us to live together as a unit, whether a city, a country, a community, a belief system, a region of the world, a continent. You know, we can even extrapolate it into globally, but we're too used to breaking it down and because of our differences rather than seeing it being the same. And as we look at this transiting South Node go through Capricorn, consensus society is going to change. Our past is going to come up into consciousness in our face, individually and collectively. Are we going to cling to it for security reasons? Or are we going to recognize it for being outdated and no longer representative of what the collective agrees is right, wrong? We can expect much debate over this whole issue of standards of right, wrong conduct. This is also the maturation process relative to our environmental conditionings. Capricorn is where we have to accept self-responsibility. In other words, we need to be looking at emotional responsibility for everything in our life. Our own actions, our own efforts, whatever happens from our efforts. In other words, the circumstances and situations of our life, there's no one else responsible for it but ourselves. And so wherever you are right now in space-time, Capricorn, the South Node is going to be bringing this up for you to take a look at it. And if you don't like your circumstances, it'll turn you inward emotionally to figure out what you want to change. It's also the maturation process relative to self-determination. Do we have the emotional discipline and will to take charge of our life in society? And this includes career. This transiting South Node in Capricorn, along with Pluto and Saturn and soon Jupiter, is really going to have us reviewing work and career, not only on an individual level, if we're still in the work arena, but we're going to be re-evaluating it collectively as groups of people, especially as you look at this whole thing called automation of all of our jobs. How many people would like to work, but their job has been replaced by a robot? So now what? How is our society going to function and change as a whole? We can have all the self-determination in the world, but it's going to be changing individually and collectively over the next few years in all kinds of ways. So depending upon where the rug gets ripped out underneath you in the world of work and career, if you're still working, how are you establishing your own individual sense of authority regardless? We'll look at this with Cancer North Node. So in general then, Capricorn is the authority, social positions of leadership, power, and control. And when we have that, we don't want to let it go. It makes us feel secure. And that transiting South Node in Capricorn will trigger many of us on emotional levels. Because whatever little position of power we have, how small or however large, we don't want to let it go because it makes us feel emotionally secure. And if something's coming along that is saying you must release this, you must let this go, how easily are you surrendering? How easily are you going to that Cancer North Node of inner security and emotional self-reliance? What we will see here in regards to consensus, which from EA's perspective is approximately 7 out of 10 souls on planet Earth, there's going to be an attempt to try and control that outer environment even more in order to feel secure. When what we need to do is just recognize the natural law of evolution, and nothing stays the same and everything changes, and what's changing in my world, and how can I ask questions and figure out what my next step is, rather than putting my head in the sand or attempt to control others or my environment or the material physical world. Capricorn is resources accumulation and management. And so it all boils down to two different value systems, what we call natural law, matriarchal principles of giving, sharing, and including, or patriarchal distortions of taking, hoarding, and excluding. And it's the two in balance. And if you study history and you study natural law, you see that humans figured out they survived better together. And so we've went from the communal family unit to the nuclear family unit. And we wonder why we fear each other. So we're going to have all kinds of issues around money and resources that are going to be emotional triggers for us through this transit. Also can be one of my favorite themes, Pluto and Capricorn, is public versus private central banking. In other words, who's going to control the money and the resources, the active many or the ruthless few? We can see more on this being really activated with Pluto, Saturn in Capricorn, Jupiter in Capricorn 2020, and all of their south nodes being transited not only by those three planets, but also by the south node in Capricorn. It will be, money and resources will be emphasized throughout the next year and a half, 2 years, even the next 5 years, with the remaining cycle of Pluto and Capricorn. And whatever is not sustainable in reality, that transiting south node in Capricorn can act as the trigger to help the Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto transits break it down. How are we going to be activating that Cancer North node in groups and communities and for ourselves emotionally moving forward? So the South Node in Capricorn can be breaking down outer security in all its forms. And again, inner reflects outer. So whatever isn't working anymore in your outer world, it's to draw you inward with South Node Cap, North Node Cancer. Draw you inward for the next level of inner security so that you can go with the flow in the changing outer world. Of course, Capricorn also relates to those boundaries of space-time, includes linear time, and as it brings along its related mortality issues. So what are our social obligations to our elders? Cancer is the early nurturing environment. Capricorn is the retirement environment. What will the South Node in Capricorn be breaking down in regards to taking care of our elders, let alone honoring our elders, or even if we have the distortion of our elders clinging to the past and their segregation and racism versus recognizing the diversity that is coming upon not only the United States, but even planet Earth as a whole. And of course, South Node in Capricorn is going to relate to, as we said before, all the gender issues, hormonal issues, our early childhood, where our authoritarian parent or father figure wasn't nurturing for us. And it'll also have us look at our own parenting issues, including issues with our own parents, issues of how we were parented, and issues of how we are parenting our children. As we spoke before, the animus issues are going to be all stirred up in the news. We already have the Trump administration trying to roll back gender equal rights. And as we can see here, we spoke before, balancing that inner male and female regardless of our gender. Now, from EA's perspective, sometimes these LGBTQ issues come from a lack of understanding reincarnation. If we incarnate ourselves in a specific gender again and again and again until we wear out its issues, evolutionary necessity can force us into the opposite gender, which will feel so extreme. We'll want to go back to the old gender, yet there's nothing to learn from it. And the evolution is being able to have compassion for the gender confusion and conversation, and allowing the soul some free choice and free will of how they perceive their path of balancing the two genders within their soul to take place. Interesting subject to work with. Not enough time for all of this tonight. Maybe it's a subject for me in the future on a webinar. And of course, can we have healing of our childhood wounds as the South Node in Capricorn stirs up old issues with our parents. And from the perspective of reincarnation, the soul chooses those parents because it is the right time and place for them to further the evolutionary lessons. So we can retreat into the Capricornian judgments and suppressions and remain stuck in the wounding, or we can make an effort to mature, to grow up, to accept. I chose these parents for the lessons they could help me learn. And of course, again, Capricorn is what we call the authoritarian parent. It is the parent that is really trying to help us grow up and become an adult in the world. And this may or may not be the father. And if you want, you can specifically look at what sign is on your 10th house cusp. You can look to see what planets are in the 10th house and where they are by their ruler's sign house. You can look for aspects. And again, you can look and see where natal Saturn is in your chart. All that together is going to tell the picture of your authoritarian parent and how the South Node in Capricorn is going to be stirring up all that energy and bringing it to the surface again in order to heal emotionally from that past and to mature into a functioning adult, especially on emotional levels, regardless of gender. The South Node transit is also the principle of involution, compression, depression. We're drawn inward again when the outer reality and circumstances no longer serve our soul. It enforces emotional reflection to become aware of whatever our inner dynamics and motivations are. And when we can be figuratively drawn into that involution, just through, again, outer world collapsing. We lose our job. We lose a parent. Something in our outer world crumbles. And if we work with it, we can rebirth it into new realities. But we can also have that involution turning inward, literally. The death of our own body and the return of our soul to spirit. Doesn't mean that's going to literally happen to all of us with the South Node transiting Capricorn, but we can all make some reflections upon the nature of our own mortality. And could we be at peace if it was our turn to leave the physical world and return back to non-physical? Boy, just that alone could be a very interesting emotional pondering through the South Node in Capricorn. Let's move on then and look at the transiting North Node in Cancer. We still have the, oops, I made a mistake right there. Passive polarity. I gotta make a note here to correct that. Didn't catch that one. Passive cardinal water. This is the emotions. Cancer is ruled by the moon. Moon also rules the fourth house. This is one of those interchangeable archetypes. Remember, North Node is how we are trying to evolve forward on an egoic or emotional level. So the main thing we're going to look at with Cancer transiting North Node is replacing outer security with inner security. An inner acceptance of ourself, regardless of our outer roles or circumstances in life. Finding a personal fulfillment within ourselves, in our world, that's not bound to our social position. And of course, these are the emotional self-reliance lessons. And people say, well, what is emotional self-reliance? It's loving ourselves. And it's accepting responsibility for ourselves under any and all circumstances. I'm the only person who can make myself happy, regardless of whether I'm married or not, whether I'm young or old, regardless of my gender, regardless of my race, regardless of my job, regardless of what country I live in, regardless of X, Y, Z, and ABC. Can I be happy within and unto myself? So look to your own natal moon by sign, house, and aspects to really ponder on this one. What sign do you have transiting? What sign do you have on the fourth house cusp? Do you have any planets natally in the fourth house? This is how you're going to be evolving your emotional self-reliance over the next year and a half. And if necessary, this transiting North Node will bring emotional shocks to force us to wake up wherever our reality, South Node Capricorn, needs to change. And sometimes those emotional shocks are going to be there to force us inward and examine what we think constitute inner security for ourselves. And whatever we think it is right now, it's going to evolve over the next 18 months. There will be a cyclic reflection on the internal dynamics that also determine our self-image, and then that determines our reality and anything and everything that constitutes security. So the Cancer North Node is going to ask us to find the emotional courage to change any outmoded, crystallized emotional patterns that we identify ourselves with. It can be an emotional pattern that says, I don't have any emotions, I'm just fine. And we can have something just emotionally explode our world all over the place. And we could be the opposite. We could be very emotionally needy. And I need that partner or that child or that pet or something or someone to be in my life in order to feel emotionally secure. Then that crystallized emotional pattern is going to have that outward identity change. And we have to go inward and say, well, who am I in and unto myself? So even here, the Cancer North Node is going to say, we have to create, again, an self-image, an emotional awareness of ourself that is not dependent upon that outer world or any career or social position. There may be some of us who will have career blocks or a career that is removed to enforce this emotional lesson. And if we're working upon a self-image, if we're working on inner security, I would like to say trying to Cancer or trying to Pisces, if we're working upon an emotional relationship with Source, it can give us that positive self-image so we can creatively go forward from North Node in Leo with creativity to North Node in Cancer. I can do this. I feel good about myself emotionally and the creative expression I want to show and experience and express on planet Earth. We can rebirth that Capricorn self-determination, but we're doing it on an emotional level, not the Capricorn pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and, suffer through suppressing any and all emotions. No, honoring the emotions, honoring that emotional ebb and flow. I love myself. I'm the best thing I have. And I'm doing the best I can do. I love myself, warts, farts, and all. I'm not perfect. No one's perfect. And so if we can find that, cup half full attitude towards ourselves emotionally, it can get contagious. We can do the same thing with others and for others. We can inspire and motivate others on emotional levels to love themselves better. We can then create emotional bonding between ourselves and others on positive levels, coming from emotional self-reliance rather than emotional neediness. Now, one of the most basic archetypes of Moon, Cancer, and fourth house is the cycling between the two broadest emotional cycles, meaning every single emotion you can experience from negative to positive. They all basically come down to emotional withdrawal and emotional animation. And all of us cycle back and forth. And these two cycles, withdrawal and animation, are going to be very, very emphasized with the moon's own nodal axis transiting Cancer-Capricorn. So we're going along in life and all of a sudden something triggers us and we want to go within. We withdraw. We want to retreat to our cave. We want to be alone. We can go silent. It's because we're being drawn inward to try and figure out, why do I feel this way? What's going on emotionally? And what's happening is old emotional patterns, maybe that have been suppressed, South Node in Capricorn. They're bubbling up to the surface from below. And it can be old patterns from our childhood. It can be old patterns from past lives. They're bubbling up so we can become aware of them in order to work to heal them, to reach a new sense of emotional equilibrium and balance, to find that self-love again, to find that inner emotional peace again. And then as we come to that emotional homeostasis, it flips over into the animation side. And this is where we want to come out of the cave. We want to emote. We want to talk about it. We want to process it. We want to share it. All of a sudden, we are animated again to go, oh, this is what was going on for me. Oh my gosh, I didn't recognize how triggered I got whenever I saw someone else, pushing their new little infant around in a baby carriage, and I didn't get to have children this lifetime. I realized how many lifetimes I've had children that were taken away from me. So can I heal that wound? I'm working on healing that wound. It feels really good to bring it to the surface and just share it with you and talk about it. And I didn't realize that my soul said on deep levels, well, if I don't have children, then I can't lose them. Wow, that's an emotional wound I can heal. By the way, that's mine personally, moon in the 10th house. So these withdrawal and animation cycles go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and they are natural. They are unpredictable. They can fluctuate from minute to minute and hour to hour and month to month. And so if all of us can be aware of these two cycles, just share, honey, I'm triggered. I need to be alone and work my way through it. I'll process with you when I understand it. We can say that to our best friend. We can say it to our partner. We can say it to our lover, to our child. A little bit harder to say to the boss, but they're usually not interested in processing that way. But we can still have those types of cycles triggered in the work environment as well. Just remember, this is going to be emphasized through the transiting nodal axis in Cancer-Capricorn. And the more you can honor it, the more you can allow yourself to have these emotional wounds surface, heal, and get to that inner emotional peace, self-love, self-reliance. And of course, along with Capricorn, the transiting node in Cancer just as equally relates to gender, hormonal, childhood, and parenting issues. Just as equally relates to balancing anima, animus, and our inner male and female regardless of gender. And transiting North Node in Cancer, Cancer, 4th house, and the moon is the early nurturing environment, and it is the nurturing parent. So moving forward emotionally over the next year and a half is for each and every one of us to reflect upon and heal any wounds from childhood, this life, past life, regardless of what our chronological age is. And from evolutionary astrology's perspective, the nurturing parent may or may not be the mother. Especially as we are going through this 15-year cycle of transiting Pluto in Capricorn. For some of us, the nurturing parent was the father or is the father. So, what sign again do you have on the 4th house cusp? Do you have any planets natally in the 4th house? Where does the moon reside natally in your chart? Those are all the issues from your early environment, this life, past life, that are coming to the surface to be emotionally healed and evolved. Now, it also happens that the archetype of Cancer will relate to racial issues. It's not the only sign. It also can be reflected through Sagittarius. It can be reflected through Aquarius. The Cancer part of racial issues comes from the field of geodetics. And that's where you take the circle of planet Earth, and the circle is 360 degrees, and you start 0 degrees at Greenwich Mean Time, and you move east, and you will get some of the meridian to be the sign of Cancer. You also, and again, there will be those who disagree, and over time things may change. But at this point, there was a lot of the human race that moved up and out of Africa, and it's looked as the mother country. And what is the majority of people occupying Africa at this point but the Black race? So even though we went all over planet Earth, and in regards to genetics, what is it that they say? We have less than 1% of genetics that are differentiated as humans, but relative to where we went geographically, we have white, red, black, yellow skin colors. You know, it's become known generically with Cancer. I bond with those that are like me, and I can have fear of those who are different than me. And all you've got to do is look at this transit of Pluto in Capricorn, okay, and how we have all this immigration prejudice going on. This issue will intensify with Saturn and Jupiter's transits into Capricorn and going over the south nodes and north nodes of those 3 planets in Capricorn, Cancer. And so relative to the transiting north node in Cancer, we are looking at expanding or evolving that bonding to include those who are different than us. In other words, the Pluto in Capricorn have and have nots exists with all races, whether you're white, black, Hispanic, or indigenous Eskimo. And so we can, as we finish up Pluto's transit through Capricorn, and it increases with Saturn and Jupiter, the transiting nodal axis is going to become the catalyst to how do we bond as groups emotionally over shared issues rather than color of our skin. And so it'll be interesting to see to what degree this can change over the next 18 months, over the rest of Pluto and Capricorn's transit. How do we recognize the difference between the extremes of inequality with wealth that exist regardless of race and regardless of country? It's going to get mixed up and stirred up. If we can't rely on the president or Congress or the courts, we have no choice but to rely on one another. Cancer. There are some in immediate peril, Capricorn, who need our help, our energy, and our solidarity. Cancer-Capricorn. This is a new book that has come out by an author who, D.D. Guttenplan, who is a very progressive author. And if you need a little hope, here's a book for you. He took his last 3 years of following the last presidential election, 2015, 16, 17, year before, of, and after. And he wrote about all the ways in which there's such commonality between the young and the old, between white, black, Hispanic. You know, it's a United States perspective. So thank you, international listeners. But you can probably extrapolate some ideas no matter what country you live in. Anyway, it's a book to give you hope and ideas going forward. If you're feeling a little despondent over this rise of the right in the US and these other places across planet Earth with other countries. Let's just jump right into Donald Trump. We're going to look at the collective, and then we're going to finish up with some of the other transits and the planetary nodes. How long is Donald Trump going to remain in charge? Until enough people rise up and demand truth, ethics, and the rule of law. His chart's going to be very activated by the nodal axis in Cancer-Capricorn, and it will be very activated by the nodal axis in Gemini-Sag. And so the nodal transit of Cancer-Capricorn, all of 19, the beginning of 2020. Gemini-Sag, the end of 2020, all of 2021. May we please be rid of him by then. And if you're a fan of Donald Trump, you found the wrong astrologer. I make no excuses from my perspective. Take it or leave it. Here's a biggie for you. December 18th of this year, 2018, the progressed natal north node of Donald Trump will conjunct his natal Uranus. Now that is emotional upsets. Thinking one way, Gemini, and reality is something else. Saying one thing, reality is something else. We've all gotten used to him talking out of both sides of his mouth. He can't stick with the truth if his life depended upon it. I looked at that progressed north node going over his Uranus, and I went, oh, could this please, please, please be a symbol of the midterm upsets and enough progressive in Congress being elective to call him on the carpet for his lies, for his lack of ethics, for his lack of obeying the rules of law. I've always felt that the biggest issue for Donald Trump was the money laundering. Cancer-Capricorn. Stay tuned. The whole elitism of 11th, 5th. We'll find out. And then, of course, his nodal axis return isn't until October 29th at 2020 at 21 Gemini-Sag. That's the next transiting nodal axis forecast in another year and a half. But here's the aspects that he's going to have. The North Node is going to conjunct those 3 Cancer planets. It's going to square the 2 Libra planets. And so what we're going to be looking here is that transiting South Node in Capricorn 5th house, facing the realities of his personal need for control and hubris. In other words, all the old emotional securities attached to being in charge. North Node Cancer 11th, the intent is emotional objectivity, and the distortions are going to be that emotional victimization and anger. Look at how much he plays that emotional victim. So where's the deepest levels of these issues going to be going on? Natal ruler Saturn here in this conjunction new phase with Venus in this 11th house. I play the victim. So all of this is going to be stirred up all over again. And will it get to the point that the masses 11th house are going to go, we don't buy this victimization anymore? Grow the fluff up. And if you don't grow up, we will force you to grow up. And what's interesting is that Saturn is in the opposite sign of its rulership, and it's going to have this North Node conjunction here. And so, you know, this is the extremes of his authoritarianism and the emotional upsets that rumor has he already displays all his temper tantrums, but that might play out on the big stage. And of course, the transiting North Node, the deepest issues that he has to work with emotionally. Here again, one more reiteration on emotional levels. And again, South Node, you know, Moon conjunction, fruition, relive, mixture of both. It ties into this opposition that's in his chart. And as we've all experienced, at least probably most of the listeners on this webinar, this is someone who couldn't tell the truth if his life depended upon it. This is someone who talks out of both sides of his mouth. So, will he experience increasing emotional isolation? Will he experience increasing emotional upsets? Will these play out on center stage? One of the things that can happen with the 11th house is we fall into, I'm only going to go to my group, tribe, 11th house that makes me emotionally feel good. And so he goes running around to all his rallies and just spouts off and says more and more and more extreme things. While it may rabble or rouse his base, it's going to increasingly turn off more and more people. Emperor has no clothes. And again, part of his relive is going to go back. And the intent, again, is to emotionally grow up. And if he doesn't, then the emotional infantilism, the emotional temper tantrums that the masses finally say, we're done with you, you're out of here one way or another. And if the GOP doesn't have the courage to do it, watch the rest of us do it. Now, I just wanted to point out that Jupiter's transit in Sagittarius is going to be extremely activated over this next year. So this is a plug for my Jupiter in Sagittarius 2-part class coming up next week, November 5th and 7th, sandwiched in between the midterm elections. I'll talk about both Donald Trump before and after the elections, as well as us individually. The following year, 2020, Jupiter is going to be in Cancer, and it will be just as equally active. Stay tuned. He is not going to get a break. Just briefly, if we look at that nodal axis in Leo Aquarius, which we're just finishing up with, Donald Trump, it was exposing all his elitism and hubris, all of his control issues and his racism. The nodal axis in Cancer-Capricorn will continue to expose all that because it's in its 11th and 5th house. But it will also expose more and more his emotional immaturity, as well as his personal and familial monetary gains in office. So as I was saying before, will a majority see him as unfit to serve at some point? How many of the consensus will continue to buy into his lies? GOP's already sold its soul, as far as I'm concerned, to remain in power. By the way, on our YouTube channel, I did a free webinar on Neptune in Pisces midpoint And in 2017-18, Neptune in Pisces went over the Republican Party's natal Neptune in Pisces 5 times. The party is 165 years old. Neptune is 165 years around the chart. This is the disillusionment of the Republican Party taking place. 165-year cycle. You can count on there being another 5 years or so at least of the Republican Party trying to find its soul again. Then when that transiting nodal axis goes into Gemini Sag, end of 2020 through 2021, the truth versus lies, reaching some type of emotional consensus. I think this is where the law is really going to catch up with Donald Trump. Whether he makes it through office 4 years, whether he is taken out of office in 4 years, even if by some unimaginable way he was reelected, his legal issues are not going to go away. So he will have all kinds of financial stuff exposed to the nodal axis in Cancer-Capricorn. There will be legal ramifications during that transit that will continue into the Gemini-Sag nodal axis transit. While the old order is dying and the new can, I want to put in the word yet be born, or we can't see it being born. A great variety of morbid symptoms appear. Antonio Gramsci, an Italian philosopher. Here's the United States chart. I use the 2:13 a.m. Gemini rising chart for July 4th. As you can see, the United States, whichever July 4th chart you use, it has a grand cross, wide orbs in the cardinal archetypes. And that cardinal modality is activated throughout this Cancer-Capricorn nodal axis transit. Remember I said cardinal modality, 2 steps forward, 1 step back? What actions are the collective going to take? If you remember, we just had a transiting nodal return for the United States that has been active most of this summer into the early fall. Here was the date that that nodal axis return was exact for the United States. All right. And here are the aspects of the transiting nodal axis for these cardinal natal planets in the US chart. Opposition to Pluto, and then conjunctions to those 3 inner planets in Jupiter, and squares to Chiron and Saturn. It's not going to slow down on emotional levels for the US either. And remember we said the emotions are going to be emphasized in Cancer-Capricorn. Those emotional swings, withdrawal and animate, all the emotional distortions, okay, you know, the Donald Trump's new word, nationalism versus patriotism, that fear of the unknown, and the only way the conservatives can win anymore is to stoke the fears of the American public. How long will the American public agree with this before they go, wait a minute, there's a bigger, larger picture going on? What about my health care? What about my job security? What about, you know, all of the many issues that we are working with? So in essence, it's going to just continue this debate in the United States of inclusive versus exclusive policies, regardless of the issue, whether it's immigrants, LGBTQ, the gender issues, you know, gun control, wages, all of the tax cut going to the rich. You know, if by some chance Republicans hold on to the majorities in the House and the Senate, you know, gutting Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, I think that could be one of the issues that really, really triggers a lot of U.S. citizens and could create a pendulum shift. You know, we don't collect Social Security beyond $128,000. We could just raise that, you know, amount on which you have to contribute Social Security. If you make under 128,000, you get, what is it, 6.25% taken out of your wages? Why can't somebody who makes more money have the 6% taken out of their wages as well? So stay tuned. This will be some, I think, an issue that will come up during Cancer-Capricorn. And, you know, the whole healthcare thing, these points are coming from Robert Reich, if you don't know who he is. You can go search him on YouTube. He's got a great post with 3 ways to save Social Security and Medicare. In regards to healthcare, all we've got to do is have the United States collectively bargain drug prices, and we can pay for healthcare in the United States. At least a vast majority of healthcare. So what we'll have here, in some ways, consensus society will try to put the feminine gender back into its more traditional roles. No equal rights. You know, how many of you have ever heard Mike Pence talk about, you know, all of his stuff on gender issues? The woman submitting to the male. And, you know, that whole thing, the woman's job is to go back home and do all that, you know, homework without any money for it. Brings up that whole issue of what we're going to be working with in time, which is universal basic income as robots take over our work. But we can also have more of that female anger at Trump and his gender racism between male and female, not to mention LGBTQ. Policies was going to, Trump's policies, it's going to motivate him even more. They're already doing it. I don't see it stopping with the nodal axis in Cancer-Capricorn. Fingers crossed, it creates a pendulum swing. Can we get to equal pay? Can we get to paid pregnancy leave like so many other countries have? Can we get to decent, sensible gun control? We will revisit the role of corporations in our lives. Should corporations be allowed personhood or having the same rights as individuals? This is the basis to Citizens United decision in 2010 that let them put as much money as they want into political and politician candidates for public office. Well, we have corporate mergers so large that we can't ignore antitrust laws anymore. And of course, you know, the United States is such an example of capitalistic extremes. And so issues around money are going to come up in the US with the nodal axis transiting Cancer-Capricorn. Because Pluto, transiting Pluto is balsamic natal Pluto. Transiting Saturn in Capricorn, balsamic natal Pluto. And the same thing with Jupiter when it gets into Capricorn. And so who's going to control the money in the US? Who's going to control the difference between the haves and the have-nots? So this issue of people and the public having a say over their lives, over having a decent living wage, etc., is going to become even more emotionally energized. and aware of how a few individuals in these multinational US corporations just control us in so many ways. In other words, that transiting South Node in Capricorn is going to reveal the worst of the Pluto in Capricorn distortions for the US. Natal Pluto in Cap and the transits bringing it all alive for us in such an extreme that it begs the question, how are we going to rise up and change it? So here are the transits to transits. Here's the transiting nodal axis with transiting Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter. All three of these planets next year in 2019 will conjunct the transiting South Node and oppose the transiting North Node. And so as each of these planets go over the transiting South Node, it's going to reveal all of the patriarchal distortions we have on planet Earth worldwide. Patriarchal distortions from our past for hundreds and thousands of years, and how the distortions are even activated, still continuing today. How are we going to choose to go forward with those North Node oppositions? There will be intense power struggles between the active many and, of course, the ruthless few. These might be some interesting dates to pay attention to, because again, the transiting nodal axis can act as the emotional triggers that change things on broad collective levels. Not to mention, you can look where each of these oppositions to the North Node and conjunctions to the South Node activate in your chart to see how it will affect you individually. I have it in a combination between the 12th house and the 1st house. Where do I want to not face realities? And how am I going to change my realities? Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter conjunct that South Node will also set the emotional stage for their conjunctions in 2020. These three planets are going to have their conjunctions together, a stellium in the sky, in the last third of Capricorn in 2020. I'll show you the dates and degrees in a moment. So will people continue to settle for oppression, which is the distortions of the South Node in Capricorn? Or will the people rise up and demand change, which is the evolution of the North Node in Cancer, in creating community emotionally bonding over a living wage, or over the right to health care, or over a place to live because our community's underwater from climate change, you know, or because we've had another shooting, and if somebody's going to carry a gun into one church, they can carry it into any church of any religion. You know, pick your issue. And you can see how it's you know, the extremes of these issues are being activated. Also, the transiting North Node in Cancer can activate Pluto and Saturn's Capricorn polarities when they are retrograde next year in 2019. Whenever a planet's retrograde, it points towards the opposite sign. And Pluto and Saturn retrograde in Capricorn is going to point to Cancer, and the North Node in Cancer will be activating it. What physical events, South Node in Capricorn, will activate the public merging together North Node in Cancer, on a variety of issues to change the future. Most likely scenario is going to be the next financial downturn and motivation to redistribute wealth. And this is true no matter what country or area of the planet you live. How are you choosing to be active on a personal level? Here's the conjunctions that they're going to have in 2020 from January to December. You can see these degrees in late Capricorn, and of course at the end of 2020, Jupiter will have one conjunction to Saturn at 0.5 degrees Capricorn. 2019, 2020, not gonna slow down, kids. Just gonna keep going. How are you going to be active? How are you going to be involved? How is it changing your world personally? Couple more things. Saturn's 3 oppositions to the North Node, 3 conjunctions to the South Node in its own sign. I'm repeating myself, but it bears repeating because all of these aspects are just repeating themes. So there's going to be all kinds of outmoded structures of consensus conditionings and consensus structures that are just going to be exposed. It can make those in consensus want to cling to the past because they're afraid for the future. How can you, individuating and spirituating, be out there educating? Be out there talking about it. How are you living through it? And how are you being part of the North Node in Cancer change? Where are you having to find your emotional courage to break free from your consensus conditionings? And I don't care where your evolutionary state of consciousness is. We all have consensus conditionings, and we're all going to be breaking free from them over the next 1.5 years. Where do you have to make emotional adjustments to move forward with new realities? How are you deepening inner security versus trying to control any of your personal outer situations? On many levels for Leroy and I, we have 4 parents in our 80s. We're working our way through elderly parents who don't want to give up control, or elderly parents who want to neglect reality. Pluto and Cancer parents who are getting emotionally triggered all over the place. There's our emotional courage that's taking place for us as we're looking at new realities. And we don't know. We thought we were going to lose a parent, Leroy's dad, in the last 3-4 months, rebounded back again one more time. But boy, did it trigger things with mom and kids calling her on some of her parenting and caretaking of her spouse when it differed from what the children thought should be done. We'll all have those types of scenarios taking place in our lives personally. We'll all have reality changing to some level, to some degree, in some area, in the familial environment, in the work environment, wherever. And again, how do we go inward and really work with it? Jupiter is going to make a trine to the North Node, sextile South Node the day after the election. We're going to have some emotional euphoria or trauma re-imprints depending upon what the midterm election results are. Conservatives will go one way, progressives will go another way. We don't know. Stay tuned. What are you doing? I gotta check in with one of my young bloods, but I think I'm going to be 4 for 4 of my 20-year-olds going out and voting. And one of them's never voted before. So I'm feeling good about that one. Jupiter will only have that one opposition, as we saw before, but all the way through the nodal axis transit in Cancer-Capricorn, Jupiter is going to be going through Sag. And so as you have any reality ripped out South Node Capricorn, as you're trying to find that emotional inner peace, North Node Cancer, show me the truth, show me the truth, show me the truth. It'll intensify if we're clinging to a personal limitation of truth. And of course, Jupiter and Sag, it's going to be revealing truth versus lies of so many things. Again, I'll go into those details next week. But it will reveal with this nodal axis transit all of the resource inequalities, where the old control wants to keep a hold of the wealth, and where we're looking for new ways to have more equitable distributions so nobody goes hungry. The transiting nodal axis with the transits of Chiron and Neptune. Chiron and Neptune being in Pisces will make those trines like Jupiter and sextile to the North Node in Cancer, sextiles to the South Node Capricorn. Here, you're going to want to be making efforts to self-heal in whatever way possible. You're going to want to take that self-responsibility for your circumstances. Chiron going back into Pisces the end of this year with that trine. Neptune still there. How do we hold healthy boundaries? Where's the courage to honor those emotions of that North Node in Cancer and move forward with whatever changes are necessary in our life? In other words, how do we take any Piscean victimization and turn it into action? Yeah, emotional courage to act. Just wanted to point this out to you one more time. This Uranus square the nodes along with Venus Moon square the nodes and opposing Uranus. Again, this is the ingress of when the nodes shift into Cancer Capricorn. And I'm pointing this out because that Uranus square the nodes. Uranus has been within orb of squaring the nodes of the moon from May of this year, and it'll continue to March of next year. Most of it up until early November has been Uranus and Taurus squaring the nodes in Leo Aquarius. How are you motivated towards creating broader, deeper security for yourself and everyone? And then as those nodes shift into Cancer, Capricorn, and Uranus goes back into Aries, it will emphasize those Aries initiations we made over the last 7 years. How are we going to reactivate those? And how are we going to cardinal modality initiate again, 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 until we see the change we want on planet Earth? And this is going to be true regardless of how the elections turn out. Okay? Uranus in Taurus for the next 7 years. How do we create a sustainable survival on planet Earth? Regardless how consensus fears want to go backwards and control, and especially control resources through fear. Uranus and Taurus will continue to bring about those slow-moving Earth events The Hawaiian volcano that went on forever, the hurricanes that went on day after day, and the cleanup that comes for months and years over the long run is going to be teaching us, we've got to make changes to survive, especially with this changing climate. So the focal point of this Uranus square the nodes is coming. We're in it right now. And it will be so interesting to see what effect it has on the election. Again, Uranus reverses, excuse me, retrogrades from Taurus back into Aries on election day. The nodal axis shifts from Leo Aquarius to Cancer Capricorn on the US election day. It's going to be a focal point. To say that it's not a burst out of the energy over the last year or 2 years, you got your head in your sand if you don't think that's going to be the case. Stay tuned. The nodal axis transit with the transiting inner planets, I just want to point out an emphasis for you. 1 year, we have Mars traveling with the inner planets. The next year, we have Mars opposing the inner planets because it goes through a retrograde. So there's going to be 3 emphasis through the nodal axis Cancer Capricorn transit. We're going to have the inner planets on the south node with south node eclipses. We're going to have the inner planets on the north node with north node eclipses. And again, oppose north node, and then be on the south node one more time with south node eclipses. I'll give you those eclipse dates, but I just want to point out how the inner planets will travel with or without, conjunct or oppose north node, oppose or conjunct south node. Doesn't mean they don't make the squares and the trines and everything else, but I just want to kind of point out these time periods for you, and they highlight with eclipses. And so while we have this base node of Saturn, Balsamic, Pluto, and Capricorn, rewriting some of our work contracts, the inner planets are going to have each of us individually exploring our relationship to work and career. Again, we are marching toward the Aquarian age and AI, or artificial intelligence, and robots taking over more and more and more of the work. And I am one of those people who feel we will get to some type of universal basic income and support because we will have no choice. There won't be enough quote unquote paying work to go around. So these personal planets, as they relate to this Cancer Capricorn, it's going to motivate each of us to re-examine our productivity in our lives, what we're paid for and what we're not paid for. On a lot of that non-paying productivity, it's the role of parenting, taking care of our children or taking care of our elderly parents. And especially as we look at those elderly parents from the perspective of their own health and their own death and dying, if you have that going on. And we also will look at parenting gender roles continue to be blended. The house husbands and the female who goes out and works. The roles within the house between the two parents interchangeable as well. I've used this before, but I put this in because this is important relative to the nodal transit in Cancer Capricorn. For those of us who live in the United States, or even in the United Kingdom, 2 quote-unquote wealthy countries, we should do a lousy rate, a lousy job at taking care of childhood poverty and feeding our children. Can we emphasize this and change this with Cancer Capricorn? Here's worldwide projections of the increase in Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's. And this is the elderly. The blue is early stage Alzheimer's in the millions, okay? And the yellow to red is late stage Alzheimer's, where they need those memory care settings that require more and more and more resources. Look for dementia and Alzheimer's and the cost of that to be in the news through this Cancer-Capricorn transit. How many of you are affected by it? I am. I have a father with early Alzheimer's, and I have a mother who's insisting that she can take care of him while she's about as stressed out as they come. And I have parents who have resources that they want to pass along to their children. Myself and my sisters have heard it forever, but they will do nothing financially to put their money where their mouth is because they're afraid to let go of the control of the money and protect the assets. In the United States, there's a 5-year look back on all of your assets. And if you have them, you have to sell those off to pay for nursing home care. Interesting subject for me and my family. So we'll all have some personal, individual way that we're looking with the whole issue of morbidity and mortality, the whole space-time aging process. How are you pondering that personally for yourself? All right, let's move through those eclipses. I have to go fast here because I've got some more slides to get through. You will have this on your PDFs, and you will have this to look at when you are listening to this webinar. Here's a visual of how solar eclipses, they take place. Total solar eclipses take place in a very small area on the planet. Partial solar eclipses taking place in the gray area, a little wider. Lunar eclipses take place over half of a hemisphere. And you have a total lunar eclipse, a partial, you know, the whole variety. You can see how this takes place visually. You'll have this as a resource. North node eclipses are when the sun is traveling with the north node. South node eclipses are when the sun is traveling with the south node. South node eclipses are reviewing the past, releasing old ego emotional energy. North node eclipses are moving forward and developing ego and emotional energy. Here's a list of all the eclipses through nodal axis in Cancer-Capricorn, and it extends beyond the dates that the nodes are in Cancer-Capricorn because of that band above and below the ecliptic in which those partial eclipses can take place. So here's your dates and degrees for you. The times are Eastern time in 24 hours, okay? 24-hour time clock, not a 12-hour AM PM. I just brought out 2 eclipses for you. In 2019, almost all these eclipses are going to, in Cancer-Capricorn, are going to emphasize the United States chart because of 4 planets in Cancer and 1 in Capricorn. And so here is a North Node solar eclipse in July for the US. Stay tuned. What will be going on for us financially? What will be going on for us in the whole immigration situation? We'll have Saturn transiting on the south node on that eclipse. What are we responsible for? What are we not responsible for? Will we be trying to take care of Medicare and Social Security, or will we be trying to gut it? Here's another one. Early January 2020 a South Node lunar eclipse. And again, these are just examples of how emphasized they will be for the United States. And what will happen is early 2020, that's when we have the first of the conjunctions between Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto. And you can see they're getting closer and closer and closer to the US natal Pluto. Things will just continue to be interesting for the United States in 2019 and 2020. Old realities continuing to break down because we need to rebirth into new ones. The nodes in Cancer-Capricorn and these solar lunar eclipses emphasizing, accentuating everybody's emotions. Do we continue to polarize in this country? Or is there some grassroots common ground that we start to find? When is the next mass shooting one too many? Look at that emphasis of planets in Capricorn in early 2020. Jupiter conjunct that south node, Saturn conjunct Pluto. The lunar eclipse taking place right dab on the Mercury-Pluto opposition in the US. Stay tuned. The stories will unfold themselves. I think you're starting to get the repeating themes. Planetary nodes, one more thing here, you. Remember we said all planets have north nodes and south nodes? What happens with the other planets? Mercury through Pluto, and even Eris if you want to include it. They're so far from Earth that their nodes are not opposite each other by degree. Moon is so close to Earth. Every 2 weeks it goes above and below the ecliptic. And so the nodes of the outer planets vary so widely, you need an actual ephemeris on a specific date to find out exactly what degree the nodes are. Here's the directions for solar fire. I'll let you look at this as a PDF in case you want to do it. That's the only software I'm aware of that lists the planetary nodes. I could be wrong, I just don't know of any others that do. Remember we said south nodes of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto are all in Capricorn for hundreds of years. In 1919-20, south node, Jupiter in Capricorn, 9 to 27. South node of Saturn in Capricorn, 21 to 30. South node of Pluto, 20 to 22. North nodes of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto are all in Cancer hundreds of years. In 2019-20, North node of Jupiter in Cancer from 30 Gemini to 13 Cancer. North node of Saturn in Cancer, 17 to 27. North node of Pluto in Cancer, 19 to 21. You could look at transiting Jupiter over the south nodes of all these planets. You could look at the transit of Saturn over all these planets. You can look at Pluto over all these planets. Oh my gosh, could we make this complicated with lists? Let's see if we can simplify it. I'm just going to show you the United States chart. I've shown this before. This is the July 4th chart. South node of Jupiter, July 4th, 1776 was at 7 cap. South node of Saturn, 23 cap. South node of Pluto, 17. North node of Jupiter, 9 Cancer. North node of Saturn, 21 Cancer. North node of Pluto, 17 Cancer. Wow. Look at that. Look at how the transits of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto through Capricorn are activating this. Look at how the nodal axis is going to activate this over the next year and a half. You think these gender equality issues between men and women are going to go away in the United States? Nope. You think the transgender issues, the LGBTQ issues are going to go away? Nope. Do you think the exclusive side of things are going to try and move us backwards? Yep. Will the progressive side of things work to be moving us forwards? Oh, I think so. What will the kids do? What will the millennials do? What will the young adults do? I think this whole Cancer-Capricorn thing is also going to have us looking at the issue of slavery and slave-like conditions. How many of you feel a slave to your job? How many of you have the freedom in work to do what you want to do? How many of you think we can have some topsy-turvy energy going along in the whole work and career arena over the next few years? We call out corporations for continuing to move jobs overseas, just not talking about it. All the issues we've spoken about can continue to come up. The South nodes in Capricorn mean that the human soul has had participation collectively in the shift from natural law or matriarchal principles to the patriarchal distortions. Evolutionary astrology feels that this happened in the sub-age of Capricorn during the age of Cancer, which was approximately 7500 to 6500 BC. And all of those old patriarchal distortions are activated when planets transit Capricorn. The North Node in Cancer is that potential to honor and nurture both genders equally, as well as honor and nurture planet Earth and all species on planet Earth. And the potential to activate and do that happens whenever planets transit Cancer. That transiting North Node in Cancer is going to have a big role over the next year and a half. Can it do it? And so again, transiting Pluto, Saturn, and Jupiter are going to conjunct their own South Node, oppose their own North Node. Remember we said transiting Pluto crossed over the ecliptic going southward this summer at 19 Cap, entering the underworld. Pluto going below the ecliptic will try to hide the shadows and patriarchal distortions, but Pluto being Pluto, it will also be exposing the shadows of the underworld. And it's emphasized right now, 250-year cycle. Let's say it's emphasized the last 5 years, and it'll emphasize the next 5 years, 10-year window, crossing over the ecliptic going southward. Boy, can't have your head in the sand right now, can you? Cancer-Capricorn nodal axis transit is going to add to the exposure and emphasis of these patriarchal distortions, wanting to create more of them at the same time it's exposing them, the potential to make steps towards natural laws and principles. Now, what happens is going to be determined by the collective will of the citizenry of each and every country. We'll all do this on a personal basis with where we've been conditioned by the patriarchy. How are we each individually being exposed to it? How are we working to love ourselves and love another in a more natural way? How are we working to heal emotionally from our own individual patriarchal distortions? How are we doing it in any group we belong to? How are we doing it in the country we live in? And how are we as a human species doing it in totality on planet Earth? Could all of this expose an emphasis with Jupiter transiting Sag on what's happening to the planet via the changing climate and how it will affect that Capricorn bottom line of resources for all of us? How long before we recognize we really are a global village and we all survive better together? Stay tuned. I like this quote. I came across it when I was doing my prep work, so I just wanted to share it. Many of you have probably heard this. The quote's attributed to a female who was speaking to Ben when he came out of Independence Hall. Well, doctor, what have we got? This is the United States, by the way. A republic or a monarchy? And Ben Franklin, a republic, madam, if you can keep it. Quite appropriate. Pluto, balsamic Pluto. I've used this one before too. I just wanted to put this in here one more time because I think we've outgrown Pluto, transiting Pluto, balsamic, the U.S. natal Pluto. I think we've outgrown the Electoral College because every vote that someone in Wyoming makes, it's worth 362 times as much as each vote one of you from California makes. And we look at the fact that two Democrats in what, the last, I can't remember, 8 elections, won the popular vote, but lost it by the Electoral College. Will this Cancer-Capricorn transit start to bring more conversation about a constitutional convention or constitutional amendments to the U.S. Constitution? Stay tuned. I think it will become more and more of an issue as we get closer to transiting Pluto, conjunct natal Pluto. Not to mention transiting Saturn and Jupiter over natal Pluto of the U.S. chart as well. We'll watch it unfold. We'll see what it brings. Just remember, Cancer-Capricorn is going to be that emotional emphasis. And so there's going to be potential for extreme breakdown of consensus laws, norms, and rules, exposing all these patriarchal distortions as compared to natural law. And that potential for individuals to bond over common values will be very strong. Will we hate one another or love one another? And can we get to a morality that is beyond religious belief systems? Jupiter's transit Sag. Common sense behaviors around resources, wealth accumulation, sustainable living wages, gun control, equal rights, gender rights, blah, 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 blah. Pick your issue in the news right now. Finally, I just want to remind you that the kids are all right. They are going to grow up and take charge because they don't have any other choice. And we're starting to hear more and more and more in the news about how these kids are starting to grow up because they don't have any other choice. So we will see a maturation process with our young ones. And if the millennials decide to take charge, they are the majority of the vote almost all over the planet, everywhere. They are my hope. Finally, how am I holding on to controlling my outer world? Where am I clinging to the emotional and physical past? How do I reach for deeper inner security? How do I evolve my sense of my own self-image? How do I deepen my self-love? How do I judge less and discern more? Where do I create a common bond with others? Where can I be a part of the changing world. All right, everyone. That is my webinar for tonight. I am going to do my 2019 forecast January 2nd. Stay tuned to our newsletter in regards to enrolling for that. Again, next week we have Jupiter in Sagittarius. Part 1 is going to be archetypes and Jupiter in Sag Part 2 will be transiting around the 12 houses. And then the week after that, we're going to have our free Mercury Retrograde podcast in Sagittarius. All right. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in there with me through all of this. I could have done a 4-hour webinar on all these subjects. Hopefully, this was helpful for you and gave you enough examples of everything. Any burning comments or questions from anybody, Leroy?
Nope, just thank yous. And I just want to alert everybody to make sure you get the follow-up email that'll be coming with the PDF. That's the link to the PDF with all this information will be included in that follow-up email from the webinar service. So, sometimes it gets spammed, it puts into your spam folder, etc. So just be looking for that. GoToWebinar is our webinar service, and we want to make sure you get this PDF. Kim put a lot of work into this one tonight, as you can tell, and we really appreciate it. So thank you for that, Kim Marie.
Thank you. Enjoy your emotional evolution, everyone. I put a cough drop in my mouth because it's been a busy 2 hours talking. Thank you, everyone.